Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another video. Today I am back to share with you all a top 10 WoW fun facts video, and in this one we are going to do a countdown of random lore facts that hopefully most of you did not know before, because if you did then that kind of makes this video pointless. But without further ado, let us start with number 10. In the years of Arthas' youth, he visited Dalaran and told his father that he wanted to travel to the magical city to learn from the mages, but in truth he wanted to be closer to. But one day, when the two were kissing, Cael'thas discovered them and was so furious with jealousy that he almost attacked Arthas on the spot, although at the time he did not. Arthas himself said that if he had attacked him on the spot he would have killed us, he would not have had a chance. Number 9. Zayre's swamp is described by Maiev as a swamp-filled hellhole, although it does not seem to be that bad in the game. Shadow Song. During the period of Warcraft 3, Maiev and a group of guardians pursued Illidan through the portal to the Outland and traveled to the Zayre swamps to seek help from Akama and the Broken, but one guardian was stung by a flying insect from the Zayre swamps, and moments later maggots began to erupt from the Night of Splashes as she was devoured from within. Insects devoured her brain and eyes while she could do nothing but wait for death. To bring more misery to this land, spores can be found all over the land, air and water, and ointments for the healthy but a death sentence for the wounded. On the way to Akama, they come across a broken one with an open wound that was completely infected with spores. To use Maev's words, spores cling to open wounds like mold on bread, making it impossible to heal. Number 8. The war against the Lich King in Northrend was one of the most devastating battles that After the war ended, a ceremony honoring the dead was held in the Cathedral of Light in Stormwind, where so many people had crowded into the church that it was filled to capacity with additional people for the ceremony. Outside the church, Archbishop Benedictus announced during the ceremony that each candle represented not just 1 or 10 lives lost in the war, but 100 lives lost in Northrend. For each candle that stood in the cathedral, Gaslow is perhaps the most loyal and least greedy goblin there has ever been, while all other goblins care less about loyalty and live with the sole purpose of cheating people and making as much gold as possible. Despite the nature of his people, when Gabbar was struck by a fire that burned down numerous buildings, Thrall came to Gaslow and asked him how much it would cost to rebuild. Gallo quoted him a price, but after seeing Thrall's pained expression at the cost, he lowered the original price, and when Karen was killed by Garrosh, Bane sent one of his advisors, Stormsong, to Gaslow to talk to him about purchasing equipment with which to defend himself against the attacks of the Grim Totem. Stormsong placed the sack of gold on the table and another sack of gold to speed up the process by which Gasol could purchase the equipment. Gasol took the first sack, took a handful of coins from the second, and then handed the second sack back to Stormsong. Stormsong then asked him a goblin, who rejected gold. Gaslow responded by saying, "I support what you and Bane are trying to do. Oh, and if you get a chance, tell Bane I always like that father." Number 6. When Jared returned to Darnassus after his wife died of disease, he noted that some of the night elves were dealing with ailments such as sickness and pain that they had never experienced before, since they were gifted with immortality. But since the Battle of Mount Hyjal, in which our comet was killed by a cataclysmic detonation at the hands of hundreds of wisps, the Night Elves have been stripped of their immortality. Jared then told Malfurion and Tyrant that this was perhaps a blessing in disguise, and he explained that we, the Night Elf people, were so proud of our great position in the world and our seemingly endless life that this was the reason why the Legion had almost slaughtered us all 10,000 years ago. Number 5. Garrosh was one of the most brilliant tacticians available to the Horde. Not only was he well versed in single combat, but he was so unpredictable in his tactics that it was almost impossible to counter him. For example, he personally led an attack on the Silverwing outpost in Ashenvale. Rather than have his troops storm the outpost and risk enormous casualties, Garrosh suffered few if any casualties, concealing his troops in the fog conjured up by the goblin machines while the shredders began cutting into the trees, forcing the giant logs to smash into the outpost, killing numerous elves and scattering their ranks. Another example is his battle against Tyrande. Garrosh again used the failure to his advantage, but this time he did not order his troops to advance with the mist. Instead, they were to maintain their lines and wait for Tyrande to clear the center. For once Tyrande called out a blessing to clear the fog. All the Horde troops saw their location and tried to deal a crushing blow to the Alliance by bombarding Rhonda's location with boulders. Had it not been for Chandra's feather moon clearing Tyrande out at the last second, Garrosh. Number 4. Magnates are one of the few races in the world that can barely get along with their own kind. They live a primitive life full of hostility and spend most of their time raiding caravans, towns and sometimes even entire cities. This is easier said than done though. As mentioned earlier, they rarely get along with their own kind and most interactions with each other usually end in bloodshed, but this does not mean they are stupid. They are just very aggressive. Magnetar are intelligent enough to create kingdoms where they make captive human slaves to feed them. However, these kingdoms usually do not last long and all the slaves escape or die because the Magnetar are too impatient to deal with this kind of crap for long. 3 Akandon that had been previously desecrated were a holy ground buried Rana and one of the people's most sacred temples. However, when the Shadow Council took control of it, they tried to summon an extremely powerful elemental called Murmur, which caused an explosion that destroyed half of the forests of Tarek and gave birth to the Bone Desert. A more detailed description of the event can be read in the Codex of Blood. The ritual by which he and his conspirators brought Murmur into their world and summoned Murmur was aided by powerful magics of containment and silencing, held together by a constant supply of souls, but they still could not control the beast or bend it to their will. Cataclysm that destroyed the area. Those proud and foolish men who believed they were controlling a cosmic being of immeasurable power. Number 2 inches contrast to the Hazan, who are usually short-tempered, impulsive and quick to act. The Genuines of Pandaria are among the wisest and most patient peoples of the land, even by the standards of the Pandaren. This is interesting because the Genu are actually descended from the Murlocs, but when they were exposed to the sacred ponds in the Valley of Eternal Blossoms, their minds and bodies began to grow and evolve into what we see today as the Mask. Makes you wonder what other Murlocs would be like if they evolved and stopped picking people off in packs of 20 or so. Immediately after the war in Northrend, Cairn Bluthif was sent by Thrall to his courtyard garage and core territory. Vanguard home to Orgrimmar as they prepared to leave, though the Horde soldiers were attacked by the merciless Cavalier, who ruthlessly killed more than a third of their troops before retreating. Sharon felt his heart drop as his wounded female orc, barely able to stand, was dragged ashore by a Cabal lover from one of the boats, where they began hacking her to pieces after they managed to hold their own against the Cabal. Garrosh looked at the Northmen and told Karen that he was sad to have to leave the frozen continent, lost his temper, scolded him and bombarded him with questions. What do you think these last hours have been? Do you disregard the sacrifice your soldiers have made? Do you now mock the wounds we now bear because our best and brightest have been slain here in Northrend? Answered Garrosh, saying that every life lost in this war counted toward a goal for the honor and glory of the Horde. Zarfong's own son was lost, and I am sad to leave, for it is herein Northrend where, against all odds, the Horde has won victory against a terrible enemy. We will be back soon with another video. Wait for us.